Howdy, boys and girls, and welcome back. It is week 4 of the college football season, and therefore week 4. It's funny how this works logically. Just 1 week 4 of the Carla and Crappy show. Hi, Carla.
Hey, Crappy. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I had a good weekend last weekend, college football wise. And I'm oddly excited about picking these week's games, even though they're really, really hard. But we will get to that, and probably we will struggle through what we're trying to say in any kind of reasonable fashion.
Yes.
I know you were busy. You were traveling. You were actually in Columbus, and then doing family stuff up in Erie. So you can be forgiven if you don't have a whole lot of college football observations from last weekend. But do you have one thing from some Saturday?
One thing. Paw Patrol is awesome.
And that's a legit thing. That's fine.
Yeah, when you're fighting for television time with a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old, you lose that battle.
Outnumbered. You're so outnumbered.
Yeah, definitely outnumbered. So I didn't get to see a lot of games. I was keeping track of stuff on my phone.
Sure.
Just kind of keeping track of scores. We watched a good part of the Penn State game off and on. And Penn State looked great again, pouring it on in the second half.
Yep.
And then the kids went to bed, so we got to watch the Ohio State TCU game.
Excellent.
So I got to watch most of that game, and I kept saying we were so enthralled in that game that we should have been flipping over to USC Texas. But we were so interested in that game, and small down Pennsylvania and cable, and so it was just like, okay, yeah, whatever, we're just gonna watch this game. But I'm debuting the new shirt this week. The new Carla and Crappy show shirt. Saturdays are for football.
Oh, we like that. That.
That's me. And this week is all about football, so I'm excited about that. My recommendation, though, is I highly don't recommend driving through the remnants of a hurricane.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds like good advice.
Yeah, it was not fun Monday coming back to Nashville. But great weekend in Columbus. Great beers. Got to try out the beers at Brewdog. High tea. That was fantastic. Had a great time in Columbus, great time with the family, and now I'm ready to get back into some like legit football. So, and we got some good ones to talk about this week.
We do. It's going to be interesting. Before we get to the games that we're going to talk about coming up this weekend, my one thing from last weekend is actually kind of depressing, especially when you think about the fact, over the last couple of seasons, you've been able to make a reasonably coherent argument that the Big Ten was actually the best conference in football, and we've referenced this twice, a couple different times this season about the Big Ten East being the best division. And when the conference goes, I think it was 8-1 in bowl games last year. That's legit. That's a solid claim to make. On Saturday alone,
yeah.
Wisconsin, Nebraska, Rutgers. I'm reading this. Wisconsin, Nebraska, Rutgers, Maryland, Northwestern, Illinois, and Purdue lost to, respectively, BYU, Troy, Kansas, Temple, Akron, which waved the Action Pirate flag, which is a cool thing.
Yeah.
South Florida, and Missouri.
Yeah.
The Big Ten sucks.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. What happened?
I don't know. And you're right. And I guess I could have made that my one thing. Because I was paying attention to that, and I was like, man, that was a really
there's a loss.
Crappy. No pun intended. Sorry here, but I'm using your name in vain. It was a really crappy day for the Big Ten. And I hate to admit it, but I mean, you're looking at some of the wins that the SEC has put forward, and they're winning. SEC's winning games they're supposed to be winning. The Big Ten is not. I'm sorry. I think the SEC might be the most equitable, other than, it's weird because like Alabama and Georgia are like way above everybody else at this point.
Yeah.
In the SEC, but man, that LSU win, holy cow!
Mm-hmm.
That was a heck of a win, and heck, cheers to Vandy for almost pulling off the upset of the weekend.
Sure.
Because that game came down to the final drive, and just one pass that didn't. I caught the very tail end of that game.
Uh-huh.
In between episodes of Paw Patrol. And I was I was really hoping Vandy was going to come down and make that game interesting.
It's a boring spot. Give me the remote. Just for a second, I promise.
Marshall's coming back, I promise.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's basically, if you're a Big Ten fan, there's basically no argument to make at this point. But before we get to our games, let's hear from AJ about what kind of fun is going on in Pac-12 After Dark.
Hey there, sports fans. It's this week's Pac-12 After Dark report from your old buddy AJ. Week 4. Last week, guys, I was real wrong. I was wrong about literally everything. I don't think I got anything right. You can check the tape. It's very true. I didn't. Guys, I may not know football this year. I don't know. But what I do know, Friday night, let's get weird. It's USC Washington State. Because the Pac-12 doesn't know any better, and they keep making USC play Washington State on a Friday. Because, you know, when you're a conference, Crappy and Carla can attest to this. When you're a conference and you're a fan of the good team in the conference, usually the conference will do nice things for you. They'll make sure that things are taken care of. You don't play any weird games for no reason against a team that somehow weirdly has your number. And here they are. It's Washington State USC. Now, Washington State is going to the Coliseum. Recall last year, travel back in time, when USC went to Washington State. They went to Pullman, and Washington State just waxed them real good. And Mike Leach did a fun interview at the end of the game, and it was super fun. It could happen again this year where Mike Leach is giving an interview at the end of the game because USC's offense is awful. It doesn't help that they have a legitimate high school senior at quarterback. Go look it up. He was supposed to, he enrolled early and then they said, "You're the quarterback now." He's supposed to be a high school senior right now. He's not. He's a quarterback at USC. Ta-da. USC's offense is awful. It is just brutal. And Washington State, while they have not played anybody of any real note, has only been giving up about 15 points a game. So go Cougs. Do not Coug this. Get a win streak going against USC. I'm sure everybody will love that. And finally, my last game that I want to preview for no points reasons, no Pac-12 reasons, my beloved Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. Had to fly a quarter of the way around the world and took an L to Massachusetts. To Army. They're basically next door. Listen, the Rainbow Warriors had to go up against the entire United States Army. And that's a tall task. You can't really ask a bunch of people who had to fly on like commercial airline to go battle the entire United States Army. And expect to win. I mean, you got to support the troops, and this is what really happened here. They lost to the Army. This week, though, they return home to the friendly confines of Aloha Stadium to play the Duquesne Dukes. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Duquesne, you might be looking at the schedule for the week, and you might see Hawaii playing some team that's Duquesne. It's Duquesne. That's how that's pronounced. It's very French. The Pittsburgh in me wants to support Duquesne here. But Carla and I know this is a city rivalry. And as fellow Colonials, get bent, Duquesne. Go Rainbow Warriors. I hope Hawaii scores 400 touchdowns. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Let's go, Bobby Moe. Let's go, Rainbow Warriors. This has been your Pac-12 After Dark report. This has been your buddy AJ, and I'll see you next week.
Big thanks, as usual, to our Pac-12 After Dark correspondent, AJ Kuftik. Carla, we spend a lot of time talking early in the season about finding out what a team is, who they are, what they're going to be for the rest of the year. And I think in this case, we have 3 ranked teams. All are playing on the road. All are favorites, but just barely. They're like by the 3.4 margin that home teams get just for being at home. So these are basically just kind of pick 'em games. And we're going to look at these in the lens of, and we're still going to pick winners, but we're going to look at these in the lens. It shouldn't be surprised if any of these teams lose on the road. But we will find out this weekend whether or not these teams are contenders, as they seem to be, or pretenders, as we could find by the time stuff wraps up late Saturday. The first game we're going to talk about, a team that I'm now familiar with, the number 17 TCU. They are playing at Texas. TCU is a 3-point favorite. You got to see a little bit of this about a little bit of TCU last weekend. So what do you think?
Yeah, TCU held their own in that game. Way more than we had predicted. We thought that game was going to be one in the trenches, and it was.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually, yeah, it was just one of those that eventually they wore down that offensive line. Put some pressure on Sean Robinson, and it was mistakes that Robinson made because he was being rushed that ended up being the difference in that game. The pick six in the third quarter that swung the momentum, finally in the favor of the Buckeyes. But hey, I mean, they were in it right there until the very end, and had that lateral not been forward, the end of the game would have been really, really interesting, right? Because Ohio State defense, that was poorly defended. You got lucky that was a forward pass.
That's clearly on the special teams coordinator who's been absent so far this season. Maybe that will improve from this point forward. Now that Coach Meyer is back.
yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, so TCU was right in that game. And Texas kind of shocked everybody by just knocking the tails off of USC. But I have some questions about that because, we've been questioning USC since the beginning of the season, knowing that they were starting a true freshman quarterback. This is a big win for Texas. Texas needed a signature win. And at this point, you could classify that as a signature win. How good is USC? I'm not sure we know yet. And then Texas goes and does Texas things, and a cornerback runs his mouth after the game to the Associated Press, and Chris Boyd tells the AP that I kind of feel like we proved that we're back. That's a terrible thing to say after a single win. It's, yes, I get it, big win, but gosh, don't say that after a game. Texas needs to take a page out of the Ohio State playbook. And figure out a way for its defense to pressure Sean Robinson, because that's how you beat TCU, is get pressure on Robinson. And we've seen that Robinson is still a little shaky, can make mistakes. Texas defense against USC had 3 sacks, but here's the impressive stat of that game is that they held the USC offense to -5 yards rushing for the entire game. That's a good rush defense. So can that rush defense translate into pressuring Sean Robinson? We'll find out. On the reverse side, though, the Texas offense still needs a little bit of help. Ellinger was just 15 of 33, so less than 500 in completions. But he threw 2 touchdowns and didn't have any interceptions. So his percentage of completions was not great, but he didn't make any mistakes. So, but I think Texas is going to have to score points against this TCU defense to be able to win this game. All 3 of these games this week are flip a coin. My gut says TCU wins this game just because I like the experience that they've got. I like the fact that they're playing, even though they're playing on the road. I think they're going to be fired up after hanging with Ohio State last week. They want to go back and resume some dominance in the Big 12, and they've won this game 5 years in a row. And so that's got to be some motivating factor. But yeah, this is one of all 3 games this week could go either way. I'm going to give the slight edge to TCU in this one.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, watching in detail, I learned a lot about the Horny Toads last weekend. As in, I might have underestimated them just a bit. The team speed, the TCU's team speed is as good as anything I've seen against Ohio State, probably since the semifinal game against Clemson a couple years ago that we're not going to speak about any longer. They're also more physical than I expected. That really showed in their pass rush. which was really nice, really well done. And especially in the first half of the game, their run defense. I think, as we mentioned, Ohio State's size wore down TCU's front seven a little bit towards the end of the game. But man, for much of that game, that was an impressive effort. And I have a lot of respect for what they do. I would have picked this as an easy win for TCU until last weekend when Texas beat USC. And that's sort of, as you mentioned, that muddies waters a little bit. You're not sure about USC. They were a top 25 team going in. The thing that I take away from that win, I think, quarterback Sam Ehlinger, he not the most effective if you're looking at quarterback rating, but 2 touchdown passes, 1 rushing score, no turnovers, a very, very big deal, and that's a solid performance no matter how you look at it. I like Texas's defense also. I mean, they clearly needed a little time in the first quarter to get their feet under them, but after SC scored a couple quick touchdowns in the first quarter, that was it. Texas pitched a shutout for the rest of the game. Texas looks like a team that has legit improved since they lost the game on the road in Maryland to open the season. Are they back? Perhaps that prediction is a little premature.
Yeah,
I think, and you mentioned the same thing. I have this written in my notes. I think the difference in this game may end up being experience, and if that is the case, I think you got to pick TCU. And it's a slight edge, but I think that's how I'm going to pick this one as well.
This is a fun game to play the transitive property of college football, which doesn't exist, right? So you have a Texas team that lost to Maryland, and Temple beat Maryland last week. So Temple beats Texas?
Yes. No. Yes. I don't know. We'll figure out a way. At some point this season, we'll figure out a way to do a whole show about the transitive property of college football. Just thinking about it makes my brain hurt.
Yes.
As it is. Our next contender/pretender is the Michigan State Spartans. They are ranked 24th this week. They are playing at Indiana, and they're in a 4.5-point favorite. This one's hard too. So I'm going to let you go first. What do you think?
Great, thanks. Yeah. No. So the end of last season, we talked about this at the beginning in the first show of this year. We talked about how Michigan State was baffling last year, that they have the talent, and for whatever reason, they just can't execute consistently. And hello, 2018 season, the exact same thing is happening here. In the fact that, they struggled to put away a very scrappy Utah State team in week 1. And we all just kind of went, yeah, that's Utah State has the tendency to play up just like Appy State does.
Opening weekend, anything can happen.
Exactly. And Utah State's been in those kinds of games before. And so it was like, okay, yeah, slow start, week 1, whatever. Okay, I kind of waved that off. And then when they went to the desert and were just stunned by Arizona State, who arguably was the laughing stock of college football entering this season.
Can we call that a hermination? I think we should call that a hermination.
A hermination. I like that. Okay. Yeah, definitely. It was a hermination, and then another transitive property of college football game, because then Arizona State lost last week.
Yes.
So who the heck knows what's going on in the Pac-12 this year? But it's just one of those things that it's just like, yeah, Sparty, who are you? And figure this out. And then the worst part of the whole thing is they had a bye week this week. So we really don't know who Michigan State is.
They're rested. We know that.
Yeah, that's true.
That's about it.
We know they're rested. Yeah, that's a good point. We know they're rested, but that's the only thing we really know about them. That and Brian Lewerke has been playing quarterback there for what seems like an eternity. And somehow he's only a junior. I don't know how that happens. But Lewerke's a good quarterback. We know this. And he's been decent so far this year. And in the pregame notes, there's a thing as whether Indiana's defense can keep up with Lewerke's accuracy. That's a great question. Sure. And we don't really know a ton about Indiana. They've played every directional team that they could find in the first 3 weeks of the year. Yes. And so they've played 3 cupcakes. they're 3-0, which for Indiana is actually, consistently that's an accomplishment. They made it through the easy part of their schedule unscathed with formidable wins against teams that they should beat. That's a good step forward for Indiana.
Yep.
Their running back is actually legit. He's averaging about 130 yards per game. Yes, against Cupcakes, but that's a good average coming out of 3 Cupcakes. But he's going up against a Sparty defense that's allowing just 34 yards per game. So this is going to be the first real test for Indiana. Can they get any sort of offense going outside, assuming that Scott is going to get bottled up by this Michigan State defense that is really good against the run? And then the other question is can Indiana's secondary keep up with Lewerke and his accuracy? So I think Sparty bounces back in this game because of those two things. I'm not sure that the Indiana defense is ready to keep up with the Michigan State's passing attack, and I'm not sure the Indiana offense gets rolling without Scott getting some yards underneath his legs. And I think that's going to be a real slog against Michigan State. So I feel a little bit more confident about this one that Sparty wins this game, but heck, anything can happen.
Here's what you need to know about Mark D'Antonio if you're not a regular Big Ten fan or you don't follow this stuff on the regular. Mark D'Antonio is not just of the Jim Tressel coaching tree. He's like the trunk. So if you're looking for splashy offensive numbers, flashy stuff, you're not going to find it. You'll find an occasional trick play, some occasional creative play calling, but generally it's going to be a fairly conservative thing, just with one goal, and that is to win the football game. So, middle of the road performances for Michigan State perhaps should not be a surprise. But this team, this feels different. If you get past the thing that we talked about, Utah State's a respectable team. It is opening weekend. You kind of watch and you think, well, this doesn't feel like steady and relentless and a team that's going to keep grinding. It just sort of feels mediocre. They are, where are my numbers? They're tied for 62nd in scoring in the country, 98th in scoring defense. They pass a lot. A really odd thing, they have not run the ball well in the first 2 games of the year. The word that I keep coming back to, it's mediocre. It does not seem like a typical Sparty team. Indiana, outside of the Penn States and Michigans, Indiana has been, to me, the most annoying team in the Big Ten in the last few years, and that's because they give Ohio State fits. And this has been a consistent thing for 4, maybe 5 years. And we're not the only ones. There have been some classic games where Indiana's like come this close to beating Michigan, and I find myself just like go and it's offense generally that's making the difference. They have thrown the ball really, really well. With Scott this year, the running attack seems to be the bigger deal. Although there's a fair amount of balance. And they were, it's worth mentioning, they were one of the few Big Ten teams to actually win last weekend against they buried Ball State, 457 yards of total offense and 38 points. You typically don't talk about defense with IU, but this year they're giving up just 18 points a game, granted against weaker competition, but that's good for 33rd best in the country. So I would pick this differently if this game were to be in East Lansing. But I think, especially if they can pass the ball enough to open up the run game, and then they play respectable defense, I think they could beat Michigan State in Bloomington. Yeah. And that's what I'm going to say.
And they almost did last year. That was the thing I did. They were up 9-3 late in that game, and it took a miracle by Sparty to come back and win that game. They ended up winning like 16-9 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, they believe Indiana believes they can win this game.
I think Ohio State opened at Indiana last season. I think this is correct. And it was actually a similar game to the TCU this past weekend, where Ohio State at halftime you're not really comfortable. And it kind of took a couple things to sort of break halfway through the third quarter, and then Ohio State pulls away. But and that's how these games have been. And I could, if they do that with a Michigan State team that feels to me like it's not a typical Michigan State team, they could win that game, which would be huge in Bloomington.
Yes, it would.
Our last game, and I'm going to preface this by saying that the fans of Alabama and Clemson, you guys are doomed. Because the other two teams that I picked for the Final Four, that'd be Washington and Wisconsin, both have losses already. And if you're a fan of the next four, you can thank me about this later. But so we're going to talk about number 18 Wisconsin visiting Iowa. Wisconsin is a 3.5-point favorite. But as Ohio State fans know, oh man, a night game at Iowa just is not good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think every team in the Big Ten knows that a night game at Kinnick is something that is, at first, it's an incredibly special thing. And like, even if you don't care nothing about either of these teams, flip over to Fox at some point on Saturday night.
This will be fun. This will be a brutal beatdown. If you're a Big Ten fan, if you're from the Midwest, gotta watch this game.
Yeah, absolutely. So Iowa's another one of those teams starting out this year that's played every single directional Iowa and Indiana that they could possibly find on the
championship. They've won the state championship.
They have. And they've played really, really well in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so here's, but we seem to be at this spot. This is the interesting thing. We're always at the spot with Iowa, right? It's week 4. They tend to win their first 3 games.
Sure.
And you come into week 4 and you're like, okay, is Iowa legit? And it looks like they should be legit, and then something goes off the rails. I like the fact they're playing at home this week for a Big Ten opener, because I think it might actually keep them on track. Mm-hmm. The fact that they're playing a night game at home. Their rush defense has been absolutely outstanding to start this year. They beat Iowa State, Big 12 school, so they're not playing just cupcakes. Right. So they've been tested against Iowa State. This defense faces a huge test going up against Jonathan Taylor this week. Is this rush defense legit? We're going to find out. But it's also a huge test for the Wisconsin offense, who, as we found out last week, really, really needs the legs of Jonathan Taylor to get that offense going. BYU figured that out, but BYU figured out a couple of other things too. And that is that going with some flashier kind of trick motion offensive plays, works really well against Big Ten teams because they don't see that kind of stuff. And that's how BYU won that game. They used a lot of motion. They used one trick play that worked. And that's exactly the opposite of an Iowa offense. I mean, if I'm going to be perfectly frank, Iowa's not going to fool anybody with motion. Let's just put it that way. They're a Big Ten offense. They're ground and pound. They're gonna, and especially with Ferentz. I mean, they're trying to run the ball right at you. So the Hawkeyes need to be able to establish some sort of offense against the good Wisconsin defense that when they're playing a standard offense, they're usually pretty solid against. Iowa's quarterback, Nate Stanley, has not yet been consistent. He needed last week to kind of shore up his season a little bit, but he was not that great against Iowa State, but did enough to win. Again, this is a really tough game to pick because, I mean, if the Iowa defense can stop Jonathan Taylor, Iowa can beat Wisconsin. And I think that's really what it boils down to is the Iowa rush defense that good enough to contain Taylor, to keep the Wisconsin offense kind of off kilter a bit because, that's as BYU figured it out. Can Iowa score enough to be able to, I don't know. What the heck? They're playing at home. even though I really want Wisconsin to have a shot at making, because I still think Wisconsin might be the best shot that we have of getting a team in a Big Ten team in the college football playoff. Even though now everybody's saying that the loss to BYU, makes it null and void. If Wisconsin runs the table the rest of the season and the only losses against BYU, and they win the Big Ten title, are they in? I would, depending on what else happens, I would still consider them pretty seriously. Okay. But I wouldn't rule them out after this one loss. But a loss against Iowa would eliminate them. So Wisconsin really needs to win this game. But I don't know. I love Kinnick at night. This is going to come out in the fourth quarter. And I don't know. Iowa?
Okay, I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then before I make my pick, I will come back to you.
Okay,
I make your pick.
I want to hear your argument.
Okay. First, I'm going to argue. I'm going to turn your words against you.
Okay.
You reminded me in the opening when I included Wisconsin in my Final Four. You reminded me that a weak Big Ten West and that schedule might work against them. If you're looking at the overall body work, even if they go through if they run the table through the season, and now that we've sort of established that the Big Ten is perhaps not as solid as it has been the past couple of seasons, I think that works against them even more. I think there's excellent chance that they are already eliminated from the Final Four, from the possibility of getting the playoff. But it's a chance. I think it's a pretty good chance, but it's a chance. If you're Wisconsin, if you're Paul Christ, you're saying, look, guys, if our goal is the Final Four, there can be no more mistakes, and it's got to start this weekend. So so they have that motivation on their side. I actually spent more time kind of looking at Iowa. Iowa keeps. We have a joke here at the Carla and Crappy show about Clemsoning, which is the one mysterious loss in the middle of the season to a team that they should not ever lose to.
Yes.
Iowa keeps Iowa-ing. Can I create my second word of the show? Iowa-ing. They just sort of do what they do. They are large. They are not really fast or flashy. It's kind of similar thing to Michigan State. And so far that's gotten to the point where they're 3-0, state championship, as I mentioned already. Offense is balanced and solid, and the defense. You mentioned the run defense specifically. I looked at scoring defense, giving up just 8 points a game.
Yeah.
And one of those teams was a Big 12 team that beat the crap out of nearly everybody last season. They're always well coached. They don't make mistakes. And I mentioned this before, as Ohio State fans know, playing a meaningful game in Iowa City is a challenge.
Especially at night.
And then you're doing it at night. Obviously, it's a trophy game. This is like the beef portion. The Heartland Trophy is the beef portion of Iowa's livestock exacta. The Floyd of Rosedale, the pork portion, comes up in early October when they play Minnesota. So I could be wrong here if Paul Christ does a good job of selling his guys on it is do or die. If our goal is a national championship, if our goal is to get to be in that Final Four, we can have no more mistakes. If he has his team's attention in that way, Wisconsin could, and I don't want to say should, because I'm not sure it's that cut and dried, but Wisconsin could win this. I think with everything, and knowing Kurt Ferentz and preparation and night game and all that stuff, I think Iowa wins. I said I was going to give you a chance before I made my pick, and I screwed that up already. What do you think? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go?
I don't know.
I don't have a coin handy.
I know.
I'm wearing sweatpants. I'm the helper.
The more I keep thinking about that Wisconsin offense, and Hornibrook's been here before.
Hornibrook's been everywhere before.
True.
He's been in college for 18 years.
And so it feels like it anyway, and it's got to feel like it for Big Ten West teams, right? And so now I'm talking myself back into Wisconsin here because of the same reason that we talked about with TCU.
Yeah.
Wisconsin has experience.
True.
Wisconsin has a lot of experience on offense, and if anybody can sort out the mystique of Kinnick at night, it's gonna be Alex Hornibrook. Comes down to the last series, and Wisconsin breaks their hearts.
Okay. Boys and girls, you can watch the Carla and Crappy Show for the duration of the college football season by searching for Carla and Crappy Show, appropriately enough, on YouTube or on Facebook. If you prefer to have Carla and Crappy in your skull, you'll find the podcast version at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn, as well as on your favorite social channels. If you like the show, please rate and review. If you don't, mind your own damn business. Carla, do you have any final thoughts?
Do not sleep on Texas A&M Alabama this weekend.
When is it?
I think it's Saturday night.
Okay.
But
get your thumb.
Get your thumb. Yeah, I should have checked the time on that. But
actually, you can stream so much now. You just get TV, laptop, boom.
Yeah, we got TV, laptop, tablet going. Is usually my setup now on Saturday afternoons. But Alabama, I like Alabama a lot in that game. But now you have the added wrinkle of Jimbo on the sideline, and that makes things really, really interesting.
They were good against Clemson.
Yes, they were. They were very good against Clemson. So do not sleep on that game. I think that could be wildly entertaining. I still think I'm still convinced Alabama wins that game. But that's going to be way more entertaining than it looks on paper, I think.
Okay. Guys, the thing that I would tell you is, in college football, it's a bad thing to look ahead. You don't want to look ahead. But I would want to remind you that next weekend is probably the biggest game of the season for my team and for hers. And I suspect we will spend an awful lot of time talking about Ohio State. Just a guess.
Just a little.
Just a guess. Carla, thank you.
Thanks as always. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. And thank you guys for watching. We will see you for Rivalry Weekend number 1 next week. Talk to you later.